My nephew just recently purchased a very large couch for his living room. It looks great, but unfortunately it doesn't have a good area to place a cup or a glass. Even the table that's in front of him is just too far away because whenever you want to recline, well, it needs that extra space. So I wanted to see if I could create a nice little armrest cup holder just for him. The first thing to do is take some measurements of this armrest, which comes out to about 7¼ inches. Now, if you notice, I can push in on the sides just a little bit because of the cushioning of that armrest, so I think I'm actually going to make it right at 7 inches wide. That way, that extra cushioning will actually push out against that holder and keep it in place so it doesn't get knocked around easily. For the top of our holder, I believe I'm going to use this 1x8. Now, it is only pine, so there's always a chance for a ding or dent in the future, but I think it'll work great for this project. Also, if you look real close, there are no knots in this thing, so it should look really nice. And for the sides, I'm going to use a 1x5 because I don't need it to be as long as the top board down the sides of the couch. I just need it to be able to grab and pinch those armrests. For the first cut, I'm going to cut the top to about 12 inches. And that should give me plenty of room for a hole for your drink, and then a spot for your phone and a spot for a remote. Next up is to cut the 1x5 down to 12 inches, and I'm going to need 2 of these for each top section. I also want to make sure there are not any knots in the top edge. And since I was cutting out the first one, I decided to cut out the second one as well. It's now time to actually trim down the sides of both of our top pieces here. It's a little hard to tell, but there's some imperfections on them that need to be trimmed down. Also, I believe they're a little bit over 7 inches. About 7 3/16. So we want to get this to right at 7 inches. I next wanted to find the center mark for the hole for our drink. Our board is 7 inches across, so I measured in 3.5 and made a mark. And I wanted to be about 1 inch from the edge, so I measured down 2 3/4 and made that cross mark. Then I'm going to use a 3.5 inch hole saw to create that hole, but I'm also going to put down some blue tape across here to hopefully help minimize some of that tear out. The hole's still going to need a little bit of sanding, but it came out pretty nice. One request that my nephew made was to actually notch out a little area so that a coffee cup, the handle here, will actually sit in it. Because if you can see here, the cup will fit in the hole, but the handle actually creates a problem and it rocks back and forth. To solve this problem, I measured in 3 inches from each side and then took a 1 inch washer and made a little rounded edge here, and we're going to try and cut that out. So I'm going to use a forcer bit to cut out the rounded edge and then use a jigsaw to cut out the rest. Now that I have this all cut out, it's still real sharp around the edge, so I'm going to use an 1/8 inch roundover bit to make it a little bit easier on your hands. And that should work really nice. Now it's just about time for me to start attaching these together, and in most cases, most people would attach them just nice and flush, but I want to do something a little bit different. I actually want to have about 1/8 inch lip here so that as things get moved around on the top, say your phone, your remote, they don't easily slide off the sides and hit the floor. But before I put those together, I need to once again grab that roundover bit and take all these side pieces and go over all of the sharp edges, so that way it's a little bit easier on your hands and your arms as you use it. I'm then going to take this piece of plywood, it's about 3/16 of an inch thick. I'm going to put it on my workbench, place the top of our panel face down on it, and then take the 2 side panels and I'm going to attach them in about that position. And once I do that, you'll see here that there's a little lip on each side, and that'll keep stuff from falling off. And to hold this together, I'm just going to use some wood glue, but you don't have to use that. You can use some brad nails or screws. At this point, the holders are nearly done, with the exception of we need to add a little backing on the back of each of these. And the reason why is when our mug or cup is sitting in here, we don't want it to be actually resting on the couch. We need it to have a surface to be resting on. And I'm going to use this really thin plywood. It's usually referred to as like a utility panel or a door panel. It's actually less than 1/8 inch thick. I've also found that this panel usually has a light side and a dark side. So since we're using some light colored wood, we're going to use the light side. So I cut down a couple pieces, making sure that it extended at least an inch past the hole. That way if there's any residue, it'll seep into the wood and not into your couch. But when it comes to attaching this panel on the bottom, I'm not going to glue it. I'm actually going to just get it in position and use some double-sided tape to hold everything down. That way, if by chance this ever gets ruined, they can peel it up and replace it. But look at it this way too, is if this gets stained, they can detach it, turn it 180 degrees and reattach it and have a fresh piece right in position. But before we attach them, my nephew actually wanted me to stain these to match some of the other decor in his house, so let's do that. I'm also going to use a pre-stained wood conditioner since we're going to use a dark stain, and hopefully that'll cut down on some of the blotchiness that commonly happens with pine. Now they have come out a little bit lighter than I was thinking. I'm guessing because that's probably pine and they just came out a little more yellow than they did the dark brown. But I think they'll still work well. Now I'm going to give these about 24 hours to dry, and then I'm going to use an oil-based polyurethane to protect it. And here is the final result, and well, we won't know for sure exactly how well they look until we put them on the couch. So let's go do that. When we first slid them into place, we noticed they were a snug fit. But my nephew kept saying they were perfect because they didn't move around easily. And even with a snug placement, they were still able to slide forward and backward if needed. Then my nephew quickly grabbed a favorite cup to test it out. And the fitment was almost perfect, with just a slight amount of room to move it around. Next up was the arm test, and he said it felt great. So I'll call that a win. Now since I designed these a little large, we had to test them with a remote and a phone. And as we hoped, there was just enough room, even when resting his arm. So now, whenever my nephew wants to enjoy a beverage while entertaining or just relaxing, he can do it with ease. Now I hope this simple project inspires you to get out in your shop and have fun building.